You were taught to earn every dollar with your time. Nobody stopped to tell you that time has a limit, but a simple habit can keep earning long after your hands grow still. That silence has cost ordinary people decades of unnecessary struggle. In this audiobook, you're about to discover a different relationship with money. Not a shortcut, not a miracle, not financial advice. A way of thinking so practical that it can begin with the smallest amount many people spend without noticing. $10, a number so ordinary that it rarely earns respect. Yet when it is given a purpose instead of a destination, it begins to behave differently. By the end of this journey, you will understand why small, repeated decisions often outperform dramatic moments, why wealth grows quietly before anyone notices it, and why the greatest financial advantage is not earning more, but teaching every dollar to become a patient worker. We will travel through 15 lessons that build one upon another, from changing the way you see money to creating systems that continue serving you while you are living your life. There is one sentence I hope follows you long after this audiobook ends. Small money obeys the same laws as great fortunes. If you truly understand that, nothing about your financial future will ever look the same again. Now settle in. Let the noise of the day drift a little farther away. This is not a race. This is a conversation between two people, one asking better questions than yesterday, and one sharing lessons that were often learned the hard way, because the first mistake people make with money is surprisingly simple. They treat every dollar like a visitor instead of an employee. Think about the difference. A visitor arrives, stays briefly, and leaves. An employee arrives with a job to perform. Most people welcome money with excitement, then immediately send it away. A meal that is forgotten tomorrow. A subscription that quietly renews every month. A purchase made to escape a difficult afternoon. None of these choices feel dangerous on their own. They are small, comfortable, familiar. That is exactly why they become powerful. Lives rarely change because of one enormous decision. They change because of thousands of invisible ones. Picture two friends beginning adulthood with nearly identical incomes. They live on the same street. They shop at the same stores. They complain about the same rising prices. From the outside, they appear to be walking the same road. But every Friday evening, one of them quietly moves $10 into a place where it can begin working. Not because $10 will make them rich overnight, because that simple act reminds the mind of something important. I build before I consume. The other friend promises to start later, after the promotion, after the debts are smaller, after life becomes less expensive, after there is finally enough. Years pass. One has trained habits. The other has collected reasons. Money listens more carefully to habits than to promises. That truth surprises people because we have been conditioned to admire dramatic transformations. We celebrate overnight success stories, lottery winners, companies that seem to appear from nowhere. We rarely witness the thousands of ordinary mornings that made those moments possible. A giant oak tree does not wake up one spring as a giant. It spends years becoming invisible strength beneath the ground before anyone admires its height. Wealth behaves much the same way. There is a season when almost nothing seems to happen. You save, you invest, you learn, you repeat. The numbers barely move. Friends wonder why you bother. Sometimes you wonder too. Then one day, the quiet years begin speaking all at once. Growth that looked slow suddenly looks obvious. People call it luck because they never watch the roots. The $10 rule is not really about $10. It is about identity. Every repeated action whispers an answer to one question. Who am I becoming? When you spend without intention, you rehearse one identity. When you build before you buy, you rehearse another. Your future is listening to those rehearsals every single day. There is a woman who finished long shifts at a hospital. She was exhausted most evenings. Her paycheck disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. She believed investing belonged to people with larger salaries until she decided to challenge one assumption. What if consistency mattered more than size? She began with an amount so small that friends laughed. She kept going anyway. Not every month felt inspiring. Unexpected bills arrived. The car needed repairs. Family emergencies demanded attention. Still, she protected one small contribution whenever she could. Years later, what impressed her most was not the balance itself. It was the calm. Money had stopped feeling like an emergency. It had become a partnership. That emotional shift is worth more than many people realize. Financial freedom begins long before financial abundance. It begins the day panic no longer makes your decisions. Another man believed earning more would solve everything. He worked weekends, accepted overtime, skipped vacations. His income doubled. So did his lifestyle: larger apartment, newer vehicle, more expensive habits. Each raise disappeared into a higher standard of living. He was climbing a ladder, leaning against the wrong wall. One afternoon, he admitted something painful. He had become richer at making money and poorer at keeping it. That confession changed everything. He did not begin with a complicated strategy. He began with $10, not because he needed the amount, because he needed the discipline. Discipline often enters through the smallest door. The remarkable thing about small commitments is that they rarely frighten us. $10 does not demand perfection. It asks only for honesty. Can you keep one promise to your future self today? Tomorrow asks the same question. Then the next day. Eventually, those answers become your character. Many people spend years searching for confidence without realizing confidence is accumulated exactly the way wealth is. One kept promise at a time. If this conversation is already reminding you of someone you care about, someone who works incredibly hard but secretly believes wealth will always belong to other people, remember them as we continue. Sometimes a single idea arrives in someone's life exactly when they are ready to hear it. Because what comes next is where the quiet transformation truly begins. The moment you stop asking how much money you can earn and begin asking how many workers your money can become before the sun rises again and the world wakes to another ordinary morning that is no longer quite so ordinary, because somewhere, unnoticed, something has already begun to grow. The greatest misunderstanding about wealth is not that people believe it requires extraordinary intelligence. It is that they believe wealth begins with extraordinary amounts of money. It does not. It begins with giving every dollar an assignment before the world gives it a distraction. Walk through any busy city and you will notice something curious. Every storefront is competing for one thing: not your money, your attention. Because once attention is captured, spending often follows without resistance. Money rarely disappears by accident. It usually follows wherever attention wanders. This is why the $10 rule matters so much. It interrupts the pattern. Before entertainment, before impulse, before convenience, before emotion. $10 quietly steps aside and begins building tomorrow. That simple sequence changes more than a bank balance. It changes the order of your priorities. Many people say they cannot afford to invest. Often, what they really mean is they have never experienced the peace of paying their future before paying everyone else. The world teaches you to satisfy today's version of yourself. Your future asks for something different. It asks for trust. Trust is difficult because the rewards are invisible at first. Plant a seed today, and tomorrow you still see dirt. Water it next week, and there is still mostly dirt. Continue for months, and someone passing by may wonder why you bother caring for an empty patch of ground. Then one morning, the earth answers. The seed was never inactive. It was becoming. Money compounds with the same quiet determination. Every contribution carries memories of every contribution before it. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. That is why consistency creates outcomes that intensity never can. People love intense beginnings, a new year, a dramatic promise, an ambitious goal. But intensity burns brightly and often disappears. Consistency is different. Consistency is ordinary enough to survive ordinary days. That is where lives change. There was a school teacher who once described her investments in a beautiful way. She said every contribution was a letter she was mailing to a future version of herself. She knew the letter would not arrive tomorrow. She knew she would not receive an immediate reply. Still, she kept writing. Years later, she smiled when those letters finally came back, carrying freedom instead of anxiety. That image stayed with me because it captures something numbers cannot. Saving is mathematics. Investing is belief. Belief that the person you become deserves opportunities the person you are today is willing to create. Some people spend decades trying to predict markets. Others spend those same decades developing predictable habits. The second group usually sleeps better. Notice something about nature. Rivers do not hurry. They simply continue moving. Day after day, season after season, given enough time, gentle water carves solid stone. Not because water is stronger, because it refuses to stop. Your financial life responds to the same principle. The $10 rule is gentle, almost humble, yet repeated often enough, it reshapes what once appeared impossible. Perhaps the most dangerous phrase in personal finance is this: I will start when I have more. More rarely arrives before better habits. Instead, better habits often create more. Think back to the first time you learned to ride a bicycle. Balance felt impossible. Every movement demanded concentration. Eventually, your body stopped thinking about balance because repetition transformed effort into instinct. Financial discipline develops the same way. At first, setting aside money feels uncomfortable. Then it feels normal. Eventually, it feels strange not to do it. That is when identity has changed. And identity is always stronger than motivation. Motivation depends on emotion. Identity depends on conviction. Someone who believes they are becoming financially wise behaves differently even on difficult days, especially on difficult days. Recessions arrive. Unexpected expenses appear, plans change, yet the habit survives because it is no longer about the amount. It is about the person making the decision. There is another lesson hidden inside the $10 rule. It teaches patience in a culture that profits from impatience. Everything around you whispers faster. Faster delivery, faster success, faster results, faster returns. Yet the most meaningful parts of life continue moving at their ancient pace. Trust grows slowly, mastery grows slowly, character grows grows slowly, real wealth grows slowly. Anything that promises otherwise deserves careful examination. Imagine standing beneath a night sky far from city lights. Thousands of stars appear all at once, but their light did not begin tonight. Some of it has been traveling for years before reaching your eyes. Success often feels exactly like that. People notice the light. They rarely see the journey. When someone finally becomes financially independent, observers often focus on the outcome. They do not see the quiet evenings spent learning instead of spending. They do not see the mornings when another small investment was made despite every temptation to postpone it. They do not see the hundreds of invisible decisions that eventually became visible freedom. The $10 rule protects you from comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. Your only responsibility is today's decision, not yesterday's regret, not tomorrow's uncertainty, only today's choice, this moment, this contribution, this promise. There will be days when $10 feels insignificant. Remember this. An architect never mocks the first brick. A musician never laughs at the first lesson. A marathon begins with one ordinary step that looks nothing like the finish line. Every remarkable structure was once impossible to distinguish from an empty piece of land. Every remarkable fortune was once too small for anyone else to notice. The question is never whether the beginning looks impressive. The question is whether the beginning continues. Years from now, you may struggle to remember what you spent on countless ordinary purchases. But you will remember the day you stopped letting your future arrive by accident. That memory has extraordinary value, because from that day forward, every paycheck carried a different meaning. It was no longer proof of work completed. It became raw material for freedom yet to be built. And once you begin seeing money that way, another realization quietly appears, one that changes not only how you save, but how you earn, because you begin to understand that the most valuable income is not the money that passes through your hands, but the money that quietly refuses to leave them. There is a quiet difference between income and ownership, and that difference shapes entire lives. Income rewards what you do today. Ownership continues rewarding what you built yesterday. Most people spend their entire careers becoming more valuable employees. There is dignity in honest work. There is pride in mastering a craft. There is satisfaction in knowing that your effort improves the lives of others. None of that is the problem. The problem begins when your entire financial future depends on your next hour of labor. Because time is generous, but it is never unlimited. At some point, every worker faces the same invisible question. What happens when I cannot, or simply no longer wish to trade another hour? The $10 rule is your first answer. It is the first brick in a bridge between earning and owning. That bridge is not built in a weekend. It is built one deliberate decision after another. Think of a farmer standing in an empty field. If someone unfamiliar with farming watched him bury healthy seeds beneath the soil, they might think he was losing something valuable. From the surface, the seed disappears. Only the farmer understands that disappearance is not loss. It is preparation. Investing often feels exactly the same. Money leaves your account. The balance appears smaller. Nothing exciting seems to happen. Yet beneath the surface, ownership has quietly begun. This is why emotionally mature investors learn to celebrate actions instead of immediate outcomes. If your happiness depends only on today's balance, every market movement will disturb your peace. But if your confidence comes from keeping your promises, temporary setbacks become teachers instead of enemies. One of the greatest financial advantages you can develop is emotional stability. Markets rise, markets fall, news headlines become dramatic. Experts confidently predict opposite futures on the very same day. Fear becomes contagious. So does excitement. The person who succeeds over decades is rarely the one who predicts perfectly. It is the one who refuses to let temporary emotion rewrite a long-term plan. Imagine sailing across an ocean. The wind changes constantly. Sometimes it pushes, sometimes it resists. An experienced captain does not scream at the weather. The captain adjusts the sails while remaining committed to the destination. Your financial life deserves that same calm. Not every month will look successful. Some investments will disappoint you. Some decisions will teach expensive lessons. Those moments do not mean the journey has failed. They mean you have entered the same classroom every experienced investor eventually visits. Failure becomes dangerous only when it convinces you to abandon wisdom altogether. Many years ago, a small business owner shared something unforgettable. He said he stopped measuring success by what he could afford. He began measuring success by what he owned that continued producing value while he slept. That single question transformed every purchase he considered. Will this become another expense? Or will this become an asset? Expenses ask for attention. Assets eventually offer support. Expenses depend on you. Assets gradually begin depending on themselves. Neither is completely avoidable. Life requires spending. Homes require maintenance. Families deserve experiences. Joy has value too. The goal is not eliminating every expense. The goal is ensuring your assets grow faster than your obligations. When that balance shifts, something remarkable happens. Money slowly becomes less stressful. Not because life becomes perfect, because pressure is no longer coming from every direction. There is another trap that quietly steals wealth from hardworking people. They confuse a higher lifestyle with a better life. Those two ideas are not always the same. A larger home may create wonderful memories. It may also create larger bills. A newer car may provide comfort. It may also demand years of additional payments. Luxury itself is not the danger. Unconscious luxury is. The $10 rule protects you from unconscious living. It asks one gentle question before every unnecessary purchase. Has my future already been paid today? If the answer is yes, enjoy your present without guilt. If the answer is no, perhaps your future deserves to eat before your impulses do. That is not deprivation. That is respect. Respect for the person you are becoming. There is something deeply peaceful about knowing that every month, regardless of circumstances, your future receives something from you, even if it is small, especially if it is small, because small promises are easier to keep, and promises kept repeatedly become self-trust. Self-trust is one of the rarest forms of wealth. Without it, goals become wishes. With it, ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things over long periods of time. If you have stayed with me this far, take a quiet moment for yourself. You do not need to announce your intentions to anyone. You do not need applause. But if this conversation has already shifted the way you see money, let that realization settle deeply. And if you know someone who constantly says they will begin saving someday, consider sharing this audiobook with them after you finish listening. Sometimes the greatest gift we offer another person is not money itself, but a different way of thinking about it. There is one more lesson hidden inside $10 that few people notice. It teaches you to become the kind of person who acts before certainty arrives. Certainty is comforting. It is also expensive. People wait until they feel completely ready to begin investing, completely informed, completely secure, completely confident. Meanwhile, years quietly pass. Confidence rarely comes before action. It usually follows action. The first contribution feels uncertain. The 20th feels familiar. The 100th becomes part of who you are. That is how confidence is built. Not by waiting, by repeating. Children learn to walk without reading books about walking. They fall, they stand, they fall again. Eventually, balance becomes natural. Financial confidence follows remarkably similar laws. Begin, adjust, learn, continue. No single step changes your life. Thousands of steps do. As your investments slowly grow, something even more valuable begins growing alongside them. Perspective. You stop asking whether $10 matters. You begin asking how many years remain for today's $10 to work. Time becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Every birthday carries a different meaning. Not 1 year older, one more year of compounding, one more year of quiet progress, one more year of invisible roots growing stronger beneath the surface. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of all. Real wealth rarely announces itself while it is being built. It grows in silence, protected by patience, strengthened by consistency, and rewarded by time, until one ordinary morning you wake up and realize that the life you once hoped for did not arrive because of one extraordinary opportunity. It arrived because you honored one small decision so faithfully that eventually even time itself began working in your favor. And from that moment forward, you could never again look at a simple $10 bill without seeing not what it could buy today, but what it could become tomorrow. There comes a point when money stops being about mathematics and begins becoming about memory. Every financial habit you practice today is remembered by the person you will become years from now. Some memories arrive with gratitude, others arrive with regret. Regret is rarely created by one disastrous decision. More often, it is assembled quietly from hundreds of moments that seem too small to matter. One unnecessary purchase, one delayed investment, one promise postponed until next month. Individually, they feel harmless. Together, they shape a future. The beautiful part is that the opposite is equally true. One intentional decision, one thoughtful investment, one promise kept. Repeated often enough, they reshape an entire life. This is why the $10 rule carries such quiet power. It teaches your mind that every decision counts before the amounts become large enough to frighten you. Many people believe discipline becomes easier after wealth arrives. In reality, wealth often arrives because discipline came first. Money amplifies character. If someone cannot direct $10 wisely, giving them 10,000 rarely changes the outcome for very long. Larger numbers simply magnify smaller habits. That realization can feel uncomfortable. It can also be deeply liberating because it means your future is not waiting for a miracle. It is waiting for another good decision. There is a story about an elderly craftsman who spent decades restoring antique clocks. Visitors often admired the finished masterpieces. They praised the polished wood, the elegant hands, the perfect rhythm of each pendulum. The craftsman would simply smile, He knew they were looking at the final result while overlooking the thousands of tiny adjustments hidden inside the mechanism. One misplaced gear could stop the entire clock. One careful correction could keep it running for generations. Your financial life works the same way. The visible results are created by invisible adjustments. You review your spending. You remove one unnecessary expense. You increase one contribution. You learn one new skill. You make one wiser decision than last month. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. Then, years later, people admire what they call your success. They rarely recognize the tiny corrections that made it possible. Another lesson often goes unnoticed. Money is patient. People usually are not. That difference explains countless financial mistakes. Someone plans an investment. A few months pass. The growth feels slow. Impatience whispers that something else must be better. A different strategy, a faster opportunity, a guaranteed return. So they abandon a healthy plan in search of excitement. Excitement rarely compounds. Patience does. Think about the people who spend decades mastering a musical instrument. No audience applauds the first awkward practice session. No concert hall celebrates the scales repeated alone in a quiet room. Yet those invisible hours eventually become effortless performances. Financial mastery deserves the same respect. It is built away from applause, away from comparison, away from urgency. There is a hidden freedom that arrives the moment you stop checking every small fluctuation. You begin measuring progress differently. Instead of asking whether your investments made money today, you ask whether you remained faithful to your process today. Processes outlive emotions. That truth reaches far beyond money. Healthy relationships grow through repeated kindness. Strong bodies grow through repeated movement. Wise minds grow through repeated learning. Financial independence grows through repeated ownership. The pattern never changes. Only the subject does. Sometimes listeners ask when they should increase the $10 rule. The answer surprises them. The amount should grow naturally as your life grows. Not because $10 loses its importance, because your capacity expands. The rule is not about staying small forever. It is about ensuring that growth never outruns wisdom. Imagine climbing a mountain. Your first steps are careful. Your breathing is deliberate. You learn the terrain. As confidence grows, your pace changes. The mountain did not become smaller. You became stronger. Money should follow that same rhythm. Grow your investments because your discipline has matured, not because excitement has returned. One of the most overlooked investments is investing in your own ability to create value. Books, courses, skills, experience. These often produce returns that no market can guarantee. A person who learns how to solve meaningful problems becomes valuable wherever they go. Income may begin with a job. It often expands through knowledge. Knowledge compounds just as powerfully as money. Every new skill quietly increases the number of opportunities capable of finding you. That is why the wealthiest people you meet often remain curious. They understand that learning is not an expense. It is an asset disguised as effort. Picture two gardens growing side by side. One receives occasional attention when the gardener feels inspired. The other receives consistent care regardless of mood. Months later, the difference appears obvious. Not because one gardener loved plants more, because one trusted routine more than emotion. Your financial garden deserves routine. It deserves calm. It deserves attention, that does not depend upon motivation. There will always be voices encouraging you to spend more than you should. Advertising has become remarkably sophisticated. It rarely sells products anymore. It sells identities. It suggests that confidence can be purchased. That respect has a price tag. That happiness is waiting inside another delivery box. But confidence earned through discipline cannot be bought. Respect earned through integrity cannot be financed. Peace created by financial stability cannot be delivered overnight. Those treasures are handcrafted, slowly, patiently, one decision at a time. As your investments continue growing, you may notice another unexpected change. You become less impressed by appearances. You stop assuming expensive means successful. You stop believing wealth must always be loud. Some of the most financially secure people live remarkably ordinary lives, not because they lack options, because they understand something the world often forgets. Real luxury is choice. The choice to work because you want to. The choice to rest without fear. The choice to help someone without creating hardship for yourself. The choice to spend time where your heart truly wishes to be. Money cannot create love. It cannot create purpose. It cannot create wisdom. But when managed well, it can protect the time needed to discover all three. And perhaps that is its highest purpose, not to become the center of your life, but to stop being the source of constant anxiety within it. Because when financial fear grows quieter, something beautiful becomes possible. You finally have enough emotional space to ask a question that very few people ever slow down long enough to consider. If money were no longer the loudest voice in my mind, who would I become? The answer to that question has very little to do with money itself. It has everything to do with freedom. Freedom is often misunderstood. People imagine it as endless vacations, expensive homes, or never looking at a calendar again. Real freedom feels much quieter. It is the ability to make decisions without fear, sitting in the room beside you. It is choosing work because it gives your life meaning, instead of choosing it only because the bills arrive every month. It is looking at an unexpected expense and responding with calm instead of panic. It is sleeping through the night because tomorrow no longer feels like an emergency. That is the destination the $10 rule points toward, not luxury, peace. Peace has extraordinary value because it changes the way you experience every other part of life. When your finances become stable, conversations become calmer, relationships become lighter, dreams become practical instead of impossible. You begin making choices based on purpose rather than survival. Survival asks, what gets me through this week? Purpose asks, what builds the next 20 years? The difference between those questions is the difference between reacting and creating. There was once a young engineer who believed wealth belonged to people born with advantages he never had. He admired successful investors from a distance, convinced they possessed secret knowledge unavailable to ordinary people. One evening, an older colleague asked him a simple question. If I gave you a tree that produced fruit every season, would you eat the tree or protect it? The engineer laughed. I would protect it. Then why? The older man replied, do you consume every dollar that could eventually become one? The question stayed with him, not because it sounded clever, because it exposed a habit he had never questioned. Every paycheck had always looked like food, never like seeds. From that day forward, he began dividing his income differently. Some money was meant for living. Some money was meant for growing. He stopped asking how much he could spend. He started asking how many future harvests each decision might destroy or create. Years later, he admitted something surprising. His income had certainly increased. His investments had certainly grown. But the greatest change had happened much earlier. His thinking had changed long before his bank account did. That sequence matters. Thoughts become habits. Habits become actions. Actions become outcomes. Trying to change the outcome without changing the pattern underneath is like painting the leaves of a sick tree while ignoring its roots. Healthy roots quietly solve visible problems. The $10 rule strengthens roots. There is another reason people struggle to build wealth. They mistake activity for progress. Being busy feels productive. Checking investment accounts 5 times a day feels responsible. Reading endless financial headlines feels educational. Yet none of those activities necessarily create wealth. Sometimes they simply create anxiety. Real progress is surprisingly repetitive. Earn, save, invest, learn, repeat. The routine lacks excitement. That is precisely why it works. Nature favors repetition. Your heartbeat repeats. Your breathing repeats. The seasons repeat. Day follows night without needing applause. The strongest systems in existence rely on consistency rather than drama. Perhaps your financial life should as well. There will always be someone appearing to move faster than you, someone buying a larger home, someone driving a newer car, someone celebrating instant success on a screen. Comparison quietly steals satisfaction because it forces your attention away from your own path. Remember this, you are not investing to impress strangers. You are investing to protect the future of someone whose name you already know, your own. That future version of you deserves patience, deserves stability, deserves opportunities you may never have experienced yourself. Every contribution is an act of generosity toward that person. Imagine meeting yourself 20 years from now, not in a dream, not in a story, face to face. What would that future version thank you for? The expensive dinner you barely remember? The impulse purchase that lost its excitement within days? Or the quiet decisions that slowly removed fear from their life? Gratitude often grows from sacrifices that once felt invisible. This is why delayed gratification is so powerful. It is not the denial of pleasure. It is the intelligent arrangement of pleasure. You postpone something small today to experience something much larger tomorrow. Children understand this lesson through simple rewards. Adults continue learning it through every financial decision they make. The remarkable thing is that delayed gratification eventually becomes easier. Not because desire disappears, because vision becomes stronger. When you clearly see where you are going, distractions lose much of their power. A traveler with a destination does not stop at every crossroads. Your destination matters. Without one, money simply flows toward whatever demands attention first. With one, every dollar gains direction. Direction creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates consistency. Consistency creates freedom. The chain begins with one intentional choice. $10. Not because $10 is magical, because action is. One thoughtful action has always been more valuable than 1,000 beautiful intentions. As the years pass, you may notice something almost impossible to explain to people who have never practiced this discipline. The amount itself becomes less exciting than the process. You stop celebrating only milestones. You begin appreciating ordinary months. Months when nothing dramatic happened. Months when you simply remained faithful to your plan. Those ordinary months are quietly extraordinary. They are the foundation beneath every visible success. The tallest buildings in the world spend far more material below the ground than above it. Strength is usually invisible. Financial strength follows the same design. No one applauds the emergency fund that prevented a crisis. No one notices the investments quietly compounding during ordinary seasons. No headline announces another month of disciplined saving. Yet those unseen victories support everything else. Never underestimate invisible progress. Invisible progress has a habit of becoming undeniable when enough time has passed. And time, despite all its mysteries, remains wonderfully fair. It compounds whatever you repeat. Repeat distraction, and distraction grows. Repeat worry, and worry becomes familiar. Repeat intentional action, and intentional living slowly becomes your identity. That is why the $10 rule is ultimately not a financial strategy. It is a philosophy, a quiet declaration that your future deserves today's effort. A refusal to allow temporary emotions to make permanent decisions. A commitment to becoming the kind of person who builds before consuming, plants before harvesting, and prepares before circumstances demand preparation. Because the greatest wealth is never created during moments of comfort. It is created through ordinary decisions that seem too small for anyone else to notice until one day the results become impossible to ignore. And by then, what looked like luck to the outside world is simply the patient reward of someone who understood that every lasting fortune begins not with abundance, but with one small decision repeated with extraordinary faithfulness. There is an invisible conversation happening every day between your present self and your future self. The strange part is that only one of them can speak. Your future cannot send messages backward through time. It cannot warn you about opportunities missed. It cannot thank you in advance for wise decisions. It cannot beg you to begin sooner. Only your present self has a voice. Every financial choice is part of that conversation. When you save instead of spend, you are speaking. When you invest instead of delay, you are speaking. When you choose patience over impulse, you are speaking. The question is simple. What story are you telling the person you will become? Some people unknowingly repeat the same sentence for years. I'll start later. Later becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. Eventually later becomes a decade. Time never argues. It simply keeps moving. The remarkable thing about time is that it does not care whether you are prepared. It rewards preparation anyway. Consider two clocks hanging on the same wall. Both measure the same hours. Both witness the same mornings. Both arrive at the same evenings. Yet one household slowly builds assets, while the other slowly builds obligations. The hours were identical. The decisions were not. This is why blaming a lack of time is rarely accurate. Most people do not need more time. They need a clearer destination for the time they already possess. Money behaves much the same way. It follows direction more willingly than emotion. Give money a mission, and it begins working. Leave it without purpose, and it quietly disappears. You have probably experienced this before. A paycheck arrives. For a brief moment, possibility fills your mind. You imagine progress. You imagine relief. Then one payment follows another. Groceries, utilities, subscriptions, repairs, entertainment, small conveniences. Before long, the balance has returned to where it always seems to return. Nothing dramatic happened. Nothing irresponsible seemed to occur. Yet another month quietly passed. This cycle continues because most people budget what remains after spending. Wealth is usually built by spending what remains after building. That single reversal changes everything. It is not punishment. It is not deprivation. It is priority. Think of a family gathering around a dinner table. The healthiest families often make sure everyone receives nourishment before dessert appears. The future deserves the same courtesy. Feed your future first, enjoy the present afterward. That order creates abundance where chaos once lived. There is another lesson hidden beneath financial discipline. It teaches emotional independence. When every desire is immediately satisfied, patience becomes weak. When every advertisement becomes a command, intention disappears. But every time you pause before spending, you strengthen something much greater than your bank account. You strengthen your ability to choose. Choice is one of the rarest forms of wealth. Many people believe they are making decisions when they are actually reacting to impulses designed by someone else. Entire industries study human attention. They understand colors, music, urgency, limited offers, countdown timers, psychology. Their purpose is simple: encourage immediate action. Your purpose must be different. Create thoughtful action. That difference protects decades of your future. Imagine walking through a forest after a storm. Some trees have fallen, others remain standing. The strongest trees are not always the tallest. Often, they are the ones whose roots reached deepest before the storm arrived. Financial storms are inevitable. Economic downturns, unexpected medical expenses, job changes, family emergencies. No strategy eliminates uncertainty. Preparation simply reduces its power. Every $10 invested wisely becomes another root extending deeper into the ground. When difficult seasons arrive, those roots matter far more than appearances. People often ask what the perfect investment is. The question itself reveals something important. They are searching for certainty. But certainty has never been available, not in markets, not in business, not even in life. Wisdom does not require certainty. It requires probability, supported by patience. The greatest investors in history have never controlled the future. They controlled their behavior. That distinction is worth remembering. You cannot control inflation. You cannot control interest rates. You cannot control global events. You can control whether your future receives another contribution this month. Control what belongs to you. Release what does not. Peace grows there. There is a beautiful simplicity in that approach. Every month asks the same question. Will you continue? Not perfectly, not dramatically. Simply continue. That question has extraordinary power because success rarely depends on one brilliant decision. It depends on refusing to abandon hundreds of ordinary ones. One of the quietest victories in life is reaching a point where your investments begin producing more than your impulses consume. At first, the difference feels tiny, a few dollars, then a little more. Eventually, those dollars begin producing their own dollars. For the first time, your money starts introducing itself to new money without requiring your constant effort. That is compounding, not merely numbers increasing, responsibility multiplying. Every contribution becomes another worker joining your team. No complaints, no vacations, no excuses. Simply quiet service over long stretches of time. The longer you allow those workers to remain employed, the more remarkable their contribution becomes. This is why beginning early carries such extraordinary value. Time is the only resource you cannot earn back. Money lost can often be replaced. Skills can be learned. Businesses rebuilt. Time moves in only one direction. Respect it accordingly. Do not become discouraged if your beginning feels modest. Every masterpiece once looked unfinished. Every author once faced a blank page. Every forest began with seeds so small they could disappear into the palm of a hand. The world often celebrates scale. Nature celebrates growth. Growth deserves your attention, because if you remain faithful to growth long enough, scale eventually introduces itself without needing to be chased. And that is when you discover something quietly extraordinary. The $10 rule was never preparing you only to build wealth. It was preparing you to become someone capable of keeping it. One day you will look back and realize that the greatest investment you ever made was not into a market. It was into a mindset. Markets change. Technologies evolve. Entire industries rise and fall. But a disciplined mind adapts to every season because it understands principles instead of chasing trends. That is why the $10 rule remains powerful regardless of the decade you live in. It is built on human behavior, and human behavior has always determined financial outcomes more than financial knowledge alone. There are people who can explain the most complicated investment strategies, yet never build lasting wealth. There are others who know only a handful of simple principles and quietly become financially independent. The difference is rarely intelligence. It is consistency. Knowledge without action becomes entertainment. Knowledge repeated through action becomes transformation. Think about someone learning to cook. Reading recipes is useful. Watching talented chefs can be inspiring. But eventually, they must stand in their own kitchen. They must make mistakes. They must burn a few meals. They must keep practicing until confidence replaces hesitation. Financial education follows the same path. Listening to audiobooks matters, reading books matters, learning matters. But none of it changes your future until one ordinary day you decide that today's $10 will no longer disappear without purpose. That single decision separates inspiration from implementation. There is another truth that deserves attention. Money magnifies values. A generous person with growing wealth often becomes even more generous. A thoughtful person gains greater opportunities to serve. A responsible parent gains more ability to protect their family. This is why building wealth should never feel selfish when it is rooted in wisdom. Resources in the hands of good people become opportunities for many others. Perhaps one day your investments help a child attend university without fear. Perhaps they allow you to care for aging parents with dignity. Perhaps they give you enough freedom to volunteer, mentor, create, or solve problems that matter deeply to you. Money is not the purpose. It is a tool. Like every tool, its value depends upon the hands that hold it. That perspective removes much of the guilt people sometimes associate with financial success. There is nothing noble about remaining financially fragile if wisdom could have created stability instead. Security creates options. Options create generosity. Generosity creates impact. The chain begins much earlier than most people imagine. It begins with small decisions made long before anyone notices their importance. A mountain guide once explained why experienced climbers rarely rush. He said the mountain punishes unnecessary speed. Every careless step, increases the chance of failure. The safest climbers appear slower. Yet they often arrive first because they never waste energy recovering from avoidable mistakes. Financial progress rewards the same patience. Rushing toward wealth often creates risks that erase years of effort. Steady progress may appear ordinary. It is remarkably difficult to stop. That resilience matters more than excitement. There will be moments when friends question your choices. They may wonder why you continue investing while they continue upgrading every part of their lifestyle. Smile, not because they are wrong, because every person is writing a different story. Comparison has ended many good plans before they had enough time to succeed. Stay faithful to your own path. The forest does not compete with the river. The stars do not compete with the sunrise. Everything meaningful grows according to its own season. Allow your financial life the same patience. There is something deeply satisfying about watching your first investment reach a milestone. Then another, not because the numbers themselves define your worth, because every milestone represents thousands of quiet decisions that no one else witnessed. Every contribution carries a memory. The evening you invested instead of spending, the month you continued despite uncertainty, the year you remained consistent while others abandoned their plans. Your portfolio eventually becomes more than numbers. It becomes evidence. Evidence that discipline can overcome distraction. Evidence that patience eventually receives its reward. Evidence that ordinary people can create extraordinary outcomes without extraordinary beginnings. If you ever doubt yourself, remember how remarkable compound growth truly is. The first snowflake seems insignificant. The first raindrop appears harmless. The first heartbeat is almost impossible to hear. Yet countless snowflakes transform landscapes. Countless raindrops fill rivers. Countless heartbeats create an entire lifetime. Never dismiss small beginnings simply because they arrive quietly. Silence has always been the birthplace of lasting strength. The world celebrates noise. Real progress usually whispers. Perhaps that is why so many people overlook it. They search for dramatic turning points while life quietly offers ordinary opportunities repeated every single day. $10. Another contribution, another promise kept, another brick placed carefully upon the last. Eventually, the structure becomes too strong to ignore. One of the greatest gifts financial discipline gives you is confidence during uncertainty. When difficult headlines appear, you no longer feel powerless. You already have a process. You already have principles. You already know your next step. Calm becomes one of your greatest assets. Panic rarely builds wealth. Calm often protects it. As the years continue, your relationship with money becomes almost unrecognizable compared to where it began. You stop seeing every dollar as something to spend. You begin seeing every dollar as a decision. Consume it, save it, invest it, give it. Each choice shapes the person making it. That realization is profoundly freeing because it reminds you that wealth is not created by chance. It is created by intention expressed repeatedly over time. There may never be a perfect moment to begin. Life will continue presenting expenses, responsibilities, unexpected setbacks, reasons to postpone. If you wait until every condition feels ideal, you may spend your entire life waiting. Begin anyway. Begin while life is imperfect. Begin while the amount feels small. Begin before confidence fully arrives, because confidence is usually waiting on the other side of action. Years from now, When someone asks how your financial life changed, you may be tempted to mention an investment, a promotion, or an opportunity. But if you answer honestly, you will probably smile and remember something much simpler. You will remember the day you stopped believing that small actions produced small results. You will remember the day $10 stopped looking like spending money and started looking like possibility. You will remember the quiet promise you made to yourself that every paycheck, no matter its size, would carry at least one seed into the future. And that promise, kept over months, then years, then decades, became something larger than wealth. It became proof that your future was never built in one extraordinary moment. It was built in ordinary moments, treated with extraordinary respect. Because fortunes are not created the day they become visible. They are created on countless quiet days when no one is watching, when the numbers seem too small to matter, when discipline feels invisible, and when a person chooses, once again, to trust that one thoughtful decision made today will become a lifetime of freedom tomorrow. There is one lesson that almost every financially successful person eventually learns. Owning your future is far more satisfying than impressing your present. That sentence sounds simple until life begins testing it. A friend arrives with a brand new car. Someone posts photographs from another luxury vacation. A coworker upgrades to a larger house. For a brief moment, comparison whispers that perhaps you're falling behind. Comparison has a clever way of measuring appearances while ignoring foundations. You see the house. You do not see the mortgage. You see the vacation. You do not see the credit card statement. You see the celebration. You do not see the anxiety that may be waiting quietly behind it. This is why wisdom asks a different question. Not, what do they own? But, what owns them? That question changes everything. Some possessions increase freedom. Others quietly reduce it. Some purchases create opportunities. Others create obligations. Learning the difference is one of the greatest financial skills you will ever develop. The $10 rule trains that instinct long before the decisions become larger. When you repeatedly choose investment over impulse, your mind begins recognizing value in places where excitement once distracted you. You become less interested in looking wealthy, more interested in becoming financially resilient. Resilience rarely attracts attention. It attracts peace. There is a profound difference. Think about an old bridge built from stone centuries ago. Thousands of travelers cross it every year. Most never stop to admire the foundation hidden beneath the river. Yet without that invisible strength, the bridge would never survive the weight above it. Financial independence rests upon equally invisible foundations: emergency savings, patient investing, controlled spending, continuous learning, reasonable expectations. These habits rarely become headlines. They quietly support every meaningful achievement that follows. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that financial freedom happens at a certain number. They imagine that once they reach a particular balance, worry disappears forever. But freedom is less about the number than the relationship. Someone earning a modest income with thoughtful habits may feel calmer than someone earning 10 times more while carrying constant financial pressure. Peace is not purchased. It is practiced. That is why the $10 rule remains powerful, even after your income grows. It reminds you that discipline is permanent. Amounts simply change. Imagine walking into a library containing every book ever written about wealth. The shelves stretch farther than the eye can see. Thousands of strategies, thousands of opinions, thousands of predictions. Now imagine placing beside them a single handwritten page. Spend less than you earn. Invest consistently. Stay patient. Continue learning. Protect your future before entertaining your present. That one page has quietly outperformed countless complicated theories. Simple does not mean easy. Simple means clear. Clear principles are easier to follow during uncertain seasons. When uncertainty arrives, complexity often creates hesitation. Clarity creates action. That is why successful people return to first principles again and again. They understand that remarkable outcomes are usually built upon remarkably ordinary behaviors repeated without interruption. There was an elderly woman who once described retirement in a way that has never left me. She said she did not feel wealthy because of what she owned. She felt wealthy because she no longer feared tomorrow. Notice the difference. Fear had disappeared before luxury ever entered the conversation. That is the kind of wealth many people secretly desire, not endless consumption, not endless accumulation. Simply enough to breathe deeply, enough to help others, enough to choose, enough to sleep peacefully, enough to enjoy ordinary mornings without carrying invisible weight. The $10 rule is not promising instant abundance. It is teaching you to build enough. Enough grows quietly. Enough grows patiently. Enough eventually becomes generosity. One day, someone you love may face a difficult season, a medical emergency, an unexpected opportunity, a dream that deserves support. If your financial habits have prepared you well, you may become the calm presence they needed rather than another person struggling alongside them. That possibility alone gives purpose to every small sacrifice made today. Money cannot replace compassion, but it can give compassion room to act. It can transform good intentions into meaningful help. That is one of the most beautiful purposes wealth can serve. As you continue this journey, remember something easy to forget. No investment grows perfectly. There will be disappointing years, unexpected setbacks, moments when progress feels invisible again. Do not mistake temporary silence for permanent failure. Winter has never convinced a wise gardener that spring has been canceled. Seasons change. Growth continues beneath the surface even when nothing appears to happen. Trust the process you have chosen. Nurture it. Protect it. Allow time to perform the work only time can do. Years from now, your children, your family, your friends, or perhaps even a complete stranger may ask how you managed to create stability in a world that often feels uncertain. You may smile because the answer will sound almost too ordinary. You began respecting small decisions before they became large ones. You learned that $10 was never just $10. It was discipline. It was patience. It was identity. It was hope given a practical form. It was proof that your future mattered enough to receive something from you every single month. And once that lesson became part of who you were, wealth stopped feeling like something reserved for other people. It became the natural consequence of a life lived with intention, humility, consistency, and the quiet courage to believe that the smallest promises faithfully kept are powerful enough to reshape an entire lifetime. Eventually, you begin to notice something remarkable. The world has not changed. Stores still advertise. People still chase the newest trends. The economy still moves through seasons of optimism and uncertainty. But you have changed? And once your relationship with money changes, the same world begins to feel entirely different. A paycheck no longer arrives with the pressure to disappear. It arrives carrying possibilities. Each dollar stands quietly before you, waiting for direction. Some will pay for today's responsibilities. Some will create today's memories. Some will be given away with generosity. And some will quietly walk into your future and begin working there long before you arrive. That is leadership, not over other people, over your own resources. Many people dream about becoming financially independent without first becoming financially intentional. Independence is never an accident. It is the accumulated result of thousands of moments when intention quietly defeated impulse. Picture a sculptor standing before an enormous block of marble. To everyone else, it looks like solid stone. To the sculptor, it already contains a masterpiece waiting to be revealed. Each careful strike removes only a tiny fragment. Day after day, almost nothing appears to change. Then eventually, people stand in awe of the finished work. They call it talent. The sculptor calls it patience. Your financial future already exists in much the same way. It is hidden inside the ordinary choices you make today. Every unnecessary expense left behind removes another piece of stone. Every investment reveals another part of the future you are creating. Every lesson learned shapes another detail. Progress rarely announces itself while it is happening. It simply continues. There is another quiet advantage to building wealth slowly. It gives your character time to grow alongside your resources. Sudden success can overwhelm someone who has never practiced responsibility. Gradual success teaches stewardship. Stewardship is the ability to care for what has been entrusted to you. Money responds remarkably well to stewardship. It tends to remain where it is respected. Imagine receiving a beautiful musical instrument. If you neglect it, its sound slowly fades. If you maintain it with care, it produces beautiful music for decades. Money behaves similarly. Ignore it completely, and it quietly slips away. Obsess over it constantly, and it may begin controlling your emotions. Respect it wisely, and it becomes a faithful servant rather than a demanding master. That balance matters, because wealth should improve your life. It should never replace your life. There are people with enormous fortunes who never feel secure. There are people with modest investments who carry extraordinary peace. The difference is rarely found in their balance sheets. It is found in their beliefs. Someone who believes they always need more will never experience enough. Someone who understands enough can appreciate growth without becoming consumed by it. Gratitude and ambition can live together. You can appreciate what you already have while still building something greater. Those two ideas strengthen one another. Gratitude protects you from endless dissatisfaction. Ambition protects you from unnecessary complacency. Together, they create healthy progress. The $10 rule quietly encourages both. You appreciate today's ability to invest, no matter how small. You remain committed to tomorrow's greater opportunities. That rhythm creates emotional balance. There is a fascinating truth about compounding that reaches far beyond finance. Kindness compounds. Trust compounds. Knowledge compounds. Health compounds. Small daily improvements in any area of life eventually become impossible to ignore. Money simply gives us one of the clearest examples because numbers allow us to watch the process unfold. But the deeper lesson is universal. Life rewards what you repeat. Repeat honesty. Repeat discipline. Repeat curiosity. Repeat generosity. Repeat thoughtful decisions. Time gathers them together and returns them multiplied in ways that often surprise us. That is why this audiobook has never truly been about investing alone. It has been about becoming. Becoming someone who thinks beyond today. Someone who values preparation over appearance. Someone who understands that freedom is built quietly before it is lived openly. If you have listened this far, I hope one idea remains with you long after these words fade. Never underestimate what a small action can become when repeated with unwavering consistency. The world often waits for dramatic opportunities. You no longer have to. You understand that extraordinary lives are usually built from ordinary moments, treated with extraordinary care. Every paycheck is another opportunity. Every month is another opportunity. Every decision is another opportunity. The future does not demand perfection. It asks only that you continue. Continue learning, continue investing, continue improving, continue trusting the process when the results remain invisible. Because invisible growth has always been the beginning of visible success. One day, perhaps years from now, you will open an account, review your investments, or simply reflect on the journey that brought you there. The numbers will certainly matter, but something else will matter even more. You will recognize the person who created them. A calmer person, a wiser person, a more patient person. Someone who no longer confuses spending with living. Someone who understands that every dollar carries a choice. Someone who discovered that wealth is not built by chasing money. It is built by giving money a purpose before the world gives it a temptation. And perhaps in that quiet moment of reflection, you will smile as you remember where it all began. Not with a winning lottery ticket, not with perfect timing, not with extraordinary income. Just one simple decision. $10. Protected instead of consumed. Planted instead of spent. Trusted instead of forgotten. A decision so small that almost anyone could overlook it. A decision so powerful that, repeated often enough, it could transform an ordinary life into one marked by confidence, resilience, generosity, and freedom. Because in the end, wealth is not measured by how much money passes through your hands. It is measured by how faithfully you taught each dollar to keep working long after you had finished earning it. And that is the quiet power of the $10 rule. A small beginning, a patient heart, a lifetime of compounding, one decision, repeated until it becomes a destiny. One final shift must happen before the $10 rule becomes part of who you are. You must stop seeing wealth as an event and begin seeing it as a rhythm. Events are exciting. Rhythms are dependable. A promotion is an event. Your saving habit is a rhythm. A great investment opportunity is an event. Your discipline is a rhythm. A lucky break may change one year. A healthy rhythm changes a lifetime. Nature has always understood this. The ocean never rushes toward the shore. It simply returns again and again and again. The sunrise never worries about applause. It arrives with quiet certainty every morning. The seasons never compare themselves with one another. Each fulfills its purpose when the time is right. Perhaps that is why the strongest financial lives often resemble nature more than they resemble headlines. Steady, patient, predictable. There is a temptation that appears once your investments begin to grow. You may feel that you have earned the right to relax your discipline. After all, the numbers look healthier now. Surely one missed contribution cannot matter. Then another month slips away, then another. Without noticing it, consistency begins dissolving. This is why successful people protect their habits more carefully than their outcomes. Outcomes rise and fall. Habits quietly create new outcomes. Guard the habit. The results will usually take care of themselves. Imagine an orchestra preparing for a performance. The audience hears only the concert. The musicians remember the rehearsals. Every perfect note rests upon thousands of ordinary repetitions that nobody applauded. Your financial life deserves the same respect. The monthly investment no one celebrates. The budget nobody notices. The unnecessary purchase quietly declined. The evening spent learning instead of mindlessly consuming. These are your rehearsals. One day they become your performance. There is also a danger in believing that wealth alone will solve every problem. It will not. Money cannot repair broken trust. It cannot replace meaningful friendships. It cannot buy another hour with someone you love. It cannot guarantee health. It cannot remove grief. Understanding those limits is strangely freeing because it reminds you that money belongs in your life, not at the center of it. The purpose of financial freedom is not to worship wealth. It is to remove unnecessary fear so that your attention can return to what truly deserves it. Family, health, purpose, service, creation, love. Those are the investments that produce returns impossible to measure with numbers. The $10 rule simply creates room for them. When financial stress grows quieter, your heart becomes available for more meaningful work. You become more present, more generous, more patient, more able to notice beauty that anxiety once hid from you. That may be the greatest dividend of all. There is an old saying that a person plants trees under whose shade they may never sit. Whether or not those exact words matter is less important than the wisdom behind them. Every thoughtful financial decision plants a tree. Some will protect you. Some will protect the people you love. Some may even benefit generations you will never meet. Think about that for a moment. A decision that takes less than a minute today could become an opportunity for someone decades from now. A child receiving an education, a grandchild beginning life without crushing debt, a family member receiving help during a difficult season, a dream finally becoming possible because someone years earlier chose patience over impulse. That is how wealth becomes legacy. Legacy is rarely built with one spectacular act. It is built through ordinary faithfulness, month after month, year after year. Long after excitement has disappeared, there will always be reasons to postpone. The economy feels uncertain. Expenses are rising. Life is busy. The timing seems imperfect. Those reasons will exist in every generation, yet every generation also produces people who quietly build stability anyway. Not because conditions were perfect, because their commitment was stronger than their excuses. Be one of those people. Not for applause, not to impress anyone, not to prove something to strangers. Do it because your future deserves someone willing to protect it today. Do it because peace is worth preparing for. Do it because freedom is rarely found. It is built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, decision by decision. If there is one image I hope remains in your mind after this audiobook ends, let it be this. Picture yourself standing in a wide open field at sunrise. In one hand, you hold $10. In the other, you hold time. Spend the money carelessly, and both hands eventually become empty. Plant the money wisely, and time becomes your partner. Day after day, season after season, while you continue living, learning, laughing, resting, working, and loving, those small seeds continue doing their quiet work beneath the surface. You may not notice them every morning. You do not need to. The roots know what to do. And one day, perhaps when life feels unusually ordinary, you will pause and realize that the shade surrounding you did not appear by accident. It grew because, years ago, you believed in something too small for most people to notice. A single habit, a simple rule, $10, repeated with patience, protected with discipline, guided by purpose, strengthened by time. That is how wealth sleeps while you sleep. That is how freedom quietly enters a life. Not all at once, but little by little, until one ordinary day, the life you once hoped for is no longer a distant dream waiting somewhere ahead. It is the life you are already living because you chose again and again to honor small decisions before they became great rewards. And in the end, that is the true secret behind lasting wealth. Not finding more money, becoming the kind of person who never lets even the smallest amount leave without first asking it one simple question. How will you help build tomorrow? The truth is, the $10 rule was never competing against poverty. It was competing against forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is expensive, not because you suddenly lose everything, because you slowly forget what truly matters. You forget that every dollar represents a piece of your life. You exchanged time for it, energy for it, attention for it, moments you will never receive again. When you spend money carelessly, you are often spending pieces of your life without realizing it. When you invest thoughtfully, you are asking those pieces of your life to return with companions. That changes everything. The conversation is no longer about dollars. It is about time. Time has always been the real currency. Money is simply one of its reflections. Think back to your first job. Perhaps the paycheck felt enormous. Perhaps it felt disappointingly small. Either way, it represented something much larger. It represented hours that could never be repeated. If someone offered you the chance to relive one of those days exactly as it happened, would you? Probably not. Because once life has been lived, it becomes memory. Money can return. Time cannot. That realization gives every financial decision a quiet dignity. You stop asking only what something costs. You begin asking what it costs in hours, in attention, in future opportunities. This way of thinking naturally slows unnecessary spending, not because you become fearful, because you become aware. Awareness is one of the greatest financial advantages anyone can possess. There is another transformation that arrives almost unnoticed. Gratitude begins replacing urgency. Instead of constantly chasing the next purchase, you begin appreciating what already serves you well. A reliable home, a comfortable chair, books that continue teaching you, friends who remain loyal regardless of your income, health that allows you another morning to build. These blessings rarely become more valuable because you buy something new. They become more valuable because you finally notice them. Contentment and progress are not enemies. They strengthen one another. Contentment keeps your desires under control. Progress keeps your potential alive. Together, they create balance. Without contentment, success never feels sufficient. Without progress, comfort quietly becomes complacency. The $10 rule protects both. It encourages movement without desperation, growth without greed, patience without passivity. There is wisdom in understanding that every season has a different assignment. Some years are for learning. Some years are for rebuilding. Some years are for accelerating. Some years simply require endurance. Financial maturity recognizes the season instead of fighting it. When storms arrive, you protect what matters. When opportunities appear, you act with preparation instead of panic. When abundance comes, you remain humble enough to remember the habits that created it. Humility quietly protects wealth. Pride often exposes it. Many fortunes have disappeared because success convinced people that the principles no longer applied to them. Never outgrow the habits that built your foundation. The tree never outgrows its roots. The taller it grows, the more deeply it depends upon them. As your income increases, let your generosity increase. Let your wisdom increase. Let your patience increase. Do not allow only your lifestyle to grow. Growth without purpose eventually becomes emptiness. Purpose transforms growth into significance. One day, you may reach a point where your investments produce enough income to cover expenses that once felt overwhelming. The first time it happens, pause. Not to celebrate the money, celebrate the discipline, because that moment was purchased years earlier by decisions no one applauded. That quiet victory belongs to every version of yourself that chose consistency when excitement had disappeared. Honor those versions of yourself. They carried you farther than motivation ever could. And if someday someone younger asks you how to begin building wealth, resist the temptation to impress them with complexity. Do not overwhelm them with endless strategies before they have mastered simple ones. Tell them this. Start before you feel ready. Protect something small. Repeat it without fail. Let time become your partner instead of your opponent. Trust the quiet work no one else can see, because fortunes are rarely hidden inside complicated secrets. They are hidden inside simple disciplines that very few people practice long enough. Then smile, because you will know something they have not yet discovered. That the first $10 was never the beginning of an investment account. It was the beginning of a different life. A life where money became a tool instead of a burden, where patience became stronger than impulse, where freedom slowly replaced fear, where every sunrise arrived carrying possibility instead of pressure, and where wealth, almost without announcing itself, became the natural reward for a person who finally understood that the smallest faithful actions, repeated over enough ordinary days, possessed the quiet power to change an extraordinary future. If you have stayed with this journey from the beginning, then you have probably noticed something. The $10 rule has quietly transformed into something much larger. It is no longer about investing $10. It is about becoming the kind of person who refuses to let small opportunities pass unnoticed. That lesson reaches into every corner of life. One conversation can change a relationship. One page can change a career. One workout can restart a neglected body. One apology can heal years of distance. One investment can begin a future that once seemed impossible. Great lives are rarely redirected by enormous forces. They are redirected by small actions, repeated with extraordinary commitment. That is why you should never underestimate ordinary days. Most people spend their lives waiting for extraordinary ones. They imagine that someday inspiration will arrive, circumstances will improve, confidence will finally appear, and then they will begin. But ordinary days are where futures are quietly written. The morning when you decide to save instead of spend. The evening when you read instead of scroll. The weekend when you learn instead of postpone. The month When you continue even though nobody notices, these moments never become headlines, yet they quietly become destinies. Imagine watching two rivers from above. One moves quickly after every storm, then almost disappears during dry seasons. The other flows steadily throughout the entire year. The first appears more impressive for brief moments. The second reaches the ocean. Consistency often looks less exciting than intensity. It is also far more dependable. That is why your financial journey should never depend on excitement. Excitement, is a visitor. Discipline becomes a resident. When discipline takes up permanent residence in your life, extraordinary things begin happening almost by accident. You stop making emotional purchases because emotional purchases no longer feel satisfying. You stop fearing temporary setbacks because you understand they are part of every meaningful journey. You stop chasing shortcuts because you finally appreciate the quiet strength of long roads. There is a deep confidence that belongs only to people who know they can trust themselves. Not because they never make mistakes, because they return to their principles after every mistake. That kind of confidence cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes another stone in its foundation. Every investment becomes another reminder that your future matters. Every patient decision becomes another vote for the person you are becoming. Perhaps that is the greatest hidden gift of financial discipline. It teaches self-respect. When you consistently protect your future, you begin believing something powerful. You begin believing that your future deserves protection. That belief changes the way you speak, the way you work, the way you spend, the way you rest, the way you dream. Identity always grows in the direction of repeated behavior. Behave like someone building wealth, and eventually your mind accepts that identity. Behave like someone constantly escaping tomorrow, and tomorrow will always feel threatening. Choose carefully which identity you rehearse, because rehearsals eventually become reality. Many years from now, your investments may tell only part of your story. The larger story will be written in the freedom they created. The afternoons you spent with family instead of worrying about bills. The opportunities you accepted because you finally had choices. The generosity you offered without placing your own future at risk. The calm that replaced constant financial pressure. Those are the true returns. Money simply made them possible. There will come a morning when you realize you no longer check your account with anxiety. Instead, you check it with gratitude. Not because every number is perfect, because every number represents another reminder that patience works, that discipline compounds, that consistency is never wasted. That time has quietly become your partner. And in that moment, something beautiful happens. You stop asking whether the $10 rule really works, because the evidence is no longer sitting in your investment account alone. It is sitting in your character. You are calmer, more intentional, less reactive, more generous, more hopeful, more free. That is wealth in its highest form, not simply possessing more, but needing less fear. So as this journey comes to a close, carry one final thought with you. The world will always offer reasons to spend. It will always promise that happiness is one purchase away. Do not argue with those voices. Simply continue building. Quietly, patiently, faithfully, let others chase appearances if they choose. You build foundations. Let others celebrate quick victories. You celebrate lasting progress. Let others measure success by what disappears. You measure success by what continues growing. And every time another paycheck arrives, pause for just a moment. Before a single dollar leaves your hands, remember the promise you made. Your future gets paid first, even if it begins with only $10, especially if it begins with only $10, because the size of the beginning has never determined the size of the ending. The ending is determined by the courage to continue after the beginning. So keep planting, keep learning, keep building, keep believing in quiet progress when loud distractions surround you. Years from now, you will not remember every investment you made. You will remember the life those investments made possible. A life where money worked while you rested, where opportunity arrived because preparation had been waiting for it, where freedom grew so gradually that you barely noticed it, until one ordinary day you realized that the future you once dreamed about had quietly become your present. And it all began with one simple rule: $10, one decision, one promise, repeated until time itself became your greatest employee. One day, perhaps many years from now, someone will ask you a question that sounds very simple. When did everything begin to change? You might smile before answering, because the honest answer will not sound dramatic enough. There will be no story about discovering a perfect investment, no tale of becoming wealthy overnight, no unbelievable stroke of luck. You will remember a quiet evening, a small decision, a commitment that seemed almost too ordinary to matter. That is how most meaningful transformations begin. Silently. The world often celebrates breakthroughs. Life is usually changed by follow-through. There is an important difference. Anyone can become excited for a day. Very few people remain committed for years. Commitment is what gives small decisions extraordinary power. Imagine a mason building an old cathedral. Each morning, he carries another stone. The work feels repetitive, heavy, almost invisible. Visitors walk past the unfinished walls, wondering when something impressive will finally appear. The mason is never discouraged by their questions. He understands something they do not. He is not building today's wall. He is building a structure that may still stand centuries after he is gone. That is the mindset of lasting wealth. You are not investing for applause. You are building something capable of supporting a future you cannot yet fully imagine. Every contribution says the same quiet sentence: I believe tomorrow is worth preparing for. Hope without action is only a wish. Action turns hope into architecture. There will be moments when life becomes unexpectedly expensive. Children grow. Parents grow older. Dreams require resources. Emergencies appear without invitation. Those seasons do not mean your philosophy has failed. They are exactly why your philosophy exists. Preparation is never fully appreciated until preparation becomes necessary. The person carrying an umbrella on a sunny morning may look overly cautious. The same umbrella becomes wisdom when the storm arrives. Financial discipline often feels unnecessary during comfortable seasons. Later, it feels priceless. This is why the $10 rule should never depend upon convenience. Convenience disappears. Principles remain. Think about all the things that quietly improve through steady attention: a garden, a marriage, a friendship, a healthy body, a skilled mind. None of them become extraordinary because of one perfect day. They become extraordinary because ordinary days were honored. Money simply follows the same law. honor enough ordinary days, and extraordinary outcomes slowly become unavoidable. Perhaps you have noticed another change during this audiobook. At the beginning, $10 seemed small. Now it feels symbolic. It represents a promise, a vote, a declaration. Every contribution quietly declares that your future deserves today's discipline. That message shapes your identity more deeply than the amount itself. Identity is powerful because people naturally protect what they believe they are. Someone who believes they are careless continues behaving carelessly. Someone who believes they are disciplined begins noticing opportunities to prove that belief true. Your mind is always collecting evidence. Give it evidence worth believing. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Not because anyone else is watching, because you are. Self-respect grows every time your actions agree with your intentions. That agreement becomes confidence. Confidence becomes consistency. Consistency becomes freedom. There is no shortcut around that sequence. Fortunately, there does not need to be. It works exactly as it is. There is a beautiful irony hidden inside financial independence. The longer you practice it, the less you think about money. People often imagine wealthy individuals spending every moment focused on finances. Many eventually discover the opposite. Once money becomes organized, attention becomes available for more meaningful pursuits. You think more about family, more about creativity, more about health, more about contribution. Money quietly moves into the background where it belongs. Not ignored. Simply managed well enough that it no longer dominates every conversation inside your mind. That may be the greatest reward of all. Freedom is not the ability to buy everything. Freedom is the ability to think about something more important than money. The $10 rule is one path toward that freedom, not because $10 is magical, because habits are. Habits become systems. Systems become lifestyles. Lifestyles become legacies. And legacies are rarely created in moments that feel extraordinary. They are created in moments that feel ordinary enough to skip. Do not skip them. Protect them. Honor them. Now repeat them. If life becomes busy, continue. If life becomes uncertain, continue. If progress feels invisible, continue. If others doubt your approach, continue. Time has an extraordinary habit of defending those who remain faithful to sound principles. Years from now, the market may look different. Technology will certainly look different. The world will continue changing in ways no one can perfectly predict. Yet discipline will still matter. Patience will still matter. Consistency will still matter. And small actions repeated over long periods will still produce results that seem impossible to those searching only for dramatic moments. So when tomorrow arrives, do not wait for perfect motivation. Do not wait for complete certainty. Do not wait for life to become easier. Simply keep one promise. Protect your future before satisfying another impulse. Let that become your rhythm. Then protect the rhythm. Because once the rhythm becomes part of who you are, wealth is no longer something you chase. It becomes something you quietly cultivate, like a patient gardener, like a careful builder, like a wise teacher planting ideas that will bloom long after the lesson has ended. And perhaps many years from now, when someone compliments the life you have built, they will see only the harvest. You will remember the seeds. They will admire the freedom. You will remember the discipline. They will notice the confidence. You will remember the uncertainty you carried through anyway. They will call you fortunate. You will quietly thank consistency because you will know the truth. The fortune they admire was never created by one extraordinary opportunity. It was created by thousands of ordinary opportunities that you chose not to waste. One paycheck at a time, one decision at a time, one promise at a time, one $10 investment at a time. Until eventually, without fanfare, without shortcuts, and without needing anyone else's permission, you became living proof that the smallest faithful actions, repeated with patience and protected by time, possess the extraordinary power to build a life that keeps giving long after the work itself is done. And perhaps that is where the final misunderstanding about wealth finally disappears. People spend years asking how to make more money. Very few spend enough time asking how to become someone who deserves to keep it. The first question changes your income. The second changes your life. Money has a strange habit. It follows value. It stays with stewardship. It grows through patience. It multiplies through consistency. It disappears through neglect. These patterns have remained true across generations because they are not economic laws alone. They are human laws. A careless person can waste abundance. A disciplined person can transform modest beginnings into remarkable endings. That should encourage you, because discipline is learned, patience is practiced, consistency is chosen. None of them require permission. None of them require perfect circumstances. They begin exactly where you are. There is a story often told among old builders. When laying the foundation for a bridge, the strongest stones are placed first, not because anyone will admire them, because they will carry every stone that follows. The foundation never receives applause. It receives responsibility. Your first investments are exactly like those hidden stones. Nobody celebrates them. Nobody photographs them. Nobody notices them. Yet years later, everything standing above them depends on those quiet beginnings. Never become discouraged simply because your foundation is invisible. Invisible strength has always been the strongest kind. There will come a season when your investments begin creating opportunities you never planned. An unexpected chance to help someone, the confidence to change careers, the freedom to take a meaningful risk, the ability to spend time where it matters most. These opportunities rarely announce themselves in advance. They arrive quietly. Prepared people recognize them. Unprepared people often watch them pass by. Preparation does not guarantee opportunity. It guarantees readiness when opportunity finally appears. That is an enormous difference. Many people believe luck changes lives. Sometimes it does. Preparation changes far more. Preparation allows ordinary opportunities to produce extraordinary results. Luck may open a door. Preparation gives you the ability to walk through it. Share this audiobook with them. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person is not money. It is a new perspective. And if you want to continue building a life of discipline, financial freedom, and lasting success, subscribe and join us on the next journey. Because this was never just an audiobook about $10. It was an audiobook about reclaiming your future. Remember, money is temporary. Time is priceless. Character is everything. And when all three begin working together, your future no longer depends on luck. It depends on the quiet decisions you make today. Sleep well, dream boldly, build patiently, and let your money keep working long after you've closed your eyes.